If this is your first time joining us, go ahead, like, comment, and subscribe.
Today on TMC, we have Fern Roberson III joining us as we have a really interesting conversation around the question, does sex complicate relationships?
So we're going to jump right in. We're going to get started and we're going to jump in on the deep end because I had a few questions that I thought about.
Deep end, huh?
Yeah. We jumping on the deep end like we know how to swim. So the first question that I want to ask, do you believe that sex complicates a relationship?
Very much so.
Right. All right. So explain to us. Explain your yes.
Okay. I'm just going off experience.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say I meet a young lady. And we kick it off and we begin to conversate. We begin to date, go out and everything. For some reason, the moment you have an intimate experience with that person, this is just my experience, things change. And I think it's because women tap into their emotions when sex is involved. Like, it's not just them going out and having sex and carrying on. It's like they give a piece of themselves. And so then the mindset changes.
So the panel could jump in, but I 100% agree. Some people try to say, no, it doesn't. I can have my little frills, but I agree 100% because we are emotional creatures. We are. And right. So when we become intimate with somebody, it's like giving them a piece of you, just like you said, and you connect with them on a different level. And I truly believe that no matter what has been said before that moment, it doesn't matter if we said we just friends and I'm cool with it, we can do this, I'm gonna be good. The moment that the intimacy happens, a dynamic shifts. And even if we never say it, we feel different.
I mean, we all know the complications that sex can create, even from a pastoral experience. I mean, it's like everybody know that I shouldn't do it, or I should wait because it's going to complicate the relationship. I don't know. I guess one of the things, man, just dealing with that desire from each person, that right. That feeling of being alone, and that feeling is like you're longing something and you're trying to get it. And be honest, and I always say this because it's easy. It's easy for me being a married man. It's easy for me to being harsh about it, to be like, yo, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. But I have somebody that I'm laying with every night.
Right.
And so it's a totally different ball game. Man, when I really, got serious about God, man, I mean, I really the biggest judgmental individual around. I mean, I judged everybody at my job that did it because, I felt like, man, you shouldn't be able to do that. But one day it just hit me like, man, I don't have that issue because I have that companion. I have everything right there at the house.
Because I was finna say now, he gave you the married man's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But as a single man, it's a challenge. It's a huge challenge because, like, I have not met a man that wanted to be alone. Us as men, in our mind, we feel like, well, we can have sex and move on and be cool the next day.
Mm-hmm.
Or so like you think. So you think. Because I think one of the things that you need to talk about is that sex is more than just a physical act.
This the dynamic. If it's our first time having sex, we've been talking and going out and everything. The next day, I might call with the usual, good morning, how you doing? Well, for her, the next day, it's going to be, hey, what you doing today? What you got to go? Did you eat? You want me to cook you something to eat? All this shifts and changes. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But to be being honest, it all depends on where you're at spiritually. Because at the end of the day, we know, for those of us who believe, that sex was created to be a spiritual experience, not a natural.
Absolutely.
It's just that where we at right now in society, it's a natural experience.
Mm-hmm.
But we know there's exchanging of energy
when
we have sex. We know that. And so that's why attachment happens.
Yeah.
And we fight that attachment, though. It's not that it's not there. It's just we choose not to acknowledge it.
Okay.
Yeah, because, I mean, a man is supposed to be attached. The way we're raised to believe is that you're supposed to go out, have sex with women, and that's what makes you a man. But the teaching of being a man as far as going out finding you a wife and staying with that woman is not being taught. And so as far like man in the morning, yeah, we can get up the next day and be cool.
Okay. Okay.
Can we put some boundary conditions on that too? Because I think that if you're not in a relationship with this person and y'all are casually dating, I think that's a dynamic that is different also. So I think that's a boundary condition of, does it complicate sex? So if you're in a situationship or you with friends with benefits, yeah, there's even more complications because there's this gray area in how do you define the relationships. And I've heard it from both men and women that when sex is introduced into a relationship, that it does complicate, because then it's like, okay, I've shared something with you that's intimate that should be that you don't share with a whole bunch of people. And now what does that do to the defining of the relationship? So if you're especially outside of the confines of we're in a relationship like peanut butter and jelly, we go together, like outside of that, then it adds a extra complication, because then it's like, what is this? And then you get questions like, well, are we only going to sleep with each other? Or, those like real life adult questions that should be asked.
As a man, I can meet a woman and we have sex and I have this sexual desire and I want it and it'll happen. But in my mind, as time progresses and we still talk and engage with one another, I continue to realize that like I'm not ready for a relationship. Now it's hard for women because a woman, most women, I'm not gonna say all women because we know nothing is absolute. A woman, that's what she's looking for. And even though you might tell them, look, I'm not looking for a relationship, I'm not ready for a relationship, and they'll be like, all right, fine. But in their mind, they still feel like they could change your mind.
I would say this. It's not even that they can change your mind, is that you are exhibiting behaviors that one would exhibit in a relationship. So you have a relationship. And so you're saying one thing with your mouth, but your actions are exhibiting something else. And that's the case for confusion.
I mean, when somebody says something, should we believe them or should we assume? Let's talk about it.
We're on the path of going deeper with the question because you said yes. And that the question is, does sex complicate a relationship? And the answer is yes, it's true. It's possible in many different ways. It can complicate the relationship, whether it's one person now believing that the relationship is something different than it was said to be. And, or if it's another person saying, I'm good with things the way they are, however it go, whatever. So now both people have different expectations of what is to follow. So when both people have different expectations of what is to follow, that's a complication, because whatever we were before, we now have a confusion as to what we are now. Like you just said, you like, I'm good. Like, okay, I had a good day. Keep it moving. She all like, what you want for dinner? And you all right? You take some lunch. And it's like, girl, we ain't doing all that, And that is the reason why I asked that question, is because I think that sometimes we are not honest to the fact that it will complicate a relationship. Cedric, you mentioned the judging part and the being from a married perspective. My idea was more like for people to understand that it could complicate the relationship. It could make things worse. It could make them awkward. It could make them completely different than they were before.
But I think the other thing to think about too is that whether it's a relationship or not, why are you having sex? Some people have sex for very different reasons. I've had privy to conversations, and sometimes men and women have sex because they're trying to keep that person. It has nothing to do, it goes sometimes beyond just, I have a sexual need and I'm trying to fulfill it, but it's, okay, I'm trying to achieve something. And that's where it can sometimes borderline on manipulation. I'm going to keep this person, or if you're not in a relationship, okay, if I have sex with him, then he'll get into a relationship with me.
Okay.
Or something along that line. So people use sex for a lot of different reasons, and it's not just for fulfillment. And so I think that goes to speak further to the complication of when sex is introduced, it opens up a Pandora's box, so to say.
There was an older white couple who was facilitating the marriage class. And so we got on the conversation about sex. It was a very candid conversation. And this lady was like, she was saying that there's a difference, because I used to have this mindset that like, make love. When I'm married, I can't wait to make love to my wife, make love. So she was like, well, you don't always got time for that. She said there's a difference between having sex and making love. Sometimes in our marriage, we just don't have time to make love and we have sex. He said those are two different experiences. So as a man, you talked about like a woman being emotionally attached and giving a part of herself. And we also talked about, what are you showing? I'm gonna tell you, I'm talking about myself again. My problem is I don't know how not to be a gentleman. I don't know how not to treat somebody with respect, dignity. I don't know how not to lift somebody up. And so even though we come to the conclusion that, okay, this is what we're doing, I'm showing you something different though. And so that's where the complication comes in, is because he's showing me I want it in a man. He's showing me what I feel like I deserve in a man, or he's showing me something I had never seen before. That desire turns from a physical desire to an emotional desire. And now the feelings start to roll. As a single man, here it is. Look, we had to understand that this is what we was doing. I thought we was good. But now you calling me, asking me why I ain't returning your text.
So basically what you're saying, you just being a gentleman.
I'm not a very sexual person, but I'm a very sensual person. And see, there's two different things. And so I don't know how not to be intimate without being attentive. I don't know how not to be intimate without being intentional. And a lot of women haven't had that, or don't know what that feels like. So it's like, for men, single men who are gentlemen, who do respect people, it's like it puts you in a situation now. Because do I continue even though I want it? Or do I be like, you know what, I know what you're looking for, and I'm just not ready to get it right now.
The second one sounds like wisdom. I'm just going to tell you. Wow. Well, because I think a lot of times that, especially if you get someone who is, this is a big step for them, is to get engaged sexually, and you go that route. I think that's why you see some destructive behaviors down the line when they realize that, oh, this is not a relationship. This is not what I thought it is. And like when you hit them with the, oh, we just friends, and then you see them turn into a thin line between love and hate.
I got some stories for you.
Oh, Jesus. The picture just became clear, because it's like, okay, we had a desire or whatever, and we slept together, but I wasn't necessarily creating a relationship. And the fact that I'm attentive to you, or sensual, or intimate with you, you know, or I'm paying attention to you, or I'm seemingly caring or romantic, that's just who I am. Yeah. That doesn't mean that I'm agreeing to anything. So you're saying that the romantic, intimate, outward part that you're seeing, that's just who I am. I'm like gentle with everybody. I'm loving with everybody. I'm attentive with everyone. But then when the sex happened, that transaction happens, now the person couples the two of those things together, and it means something different to them than it means to you as a man. Because you said, speaking for myself.
But how does the woman know that you're like that with everybody else? And I think that's the missing part of that people say, oh, you misinterpreted my feelings. Well, how do I know that you're nice and gentle and respectful when you put the small of your hand on everybody's on the back? You know, how do I know that? So I think that's the missing part of that. But the onus is on who? Now, see, that's where the question is, because since I don't know your interactions with everybody else, so how can you communicate that? Because I would say the onus is on that person, because it's how can I know something that I don't know? So the onus is that person to be more cognitive of the things that they're doing, especially if you have a past history that shows, okay, when I am really like this and really just, you know, super attentive and details, this tends to happen. So maybe I should shift this so I can get a different outcome. And that, because I think at the end of the day, we don't want a trail of broken and destruction behind us, whether we cause it intentionally or unintentionally. And I think it goes back to the original things, is that when you introduce physical aspects, whether it's kissing, heavy kissing, or sex, that it changes and it shifts the nature of it. But then it adds this layer of complication that if you hadn't previously had these conversations with, becomes even more messy and complicated, and can lead to broken hearts, destruction, sometimes jail time, and all this other stuff. So
right. And so what ends up happening is like, women don't have the same understanding as men, because they will interpret what you do or what you say according to what they want it to be, not or agree to. And so when it comes along, is that I end up being the bad guy.
Wow.
I made you feel so. Like, let's say you got a woman who comes from a situation to where she was with a man and their intimacy was more so of a chore than it was a mutual response from each other. And she felt like she was just going through the motions with him. Or she come from a relationship where the man just wasn't attentive. You know, like she didn't get pleased in her last relationship. And so now she meets whatever man it is she meets next, and he is. So now her mind is off Joe Blow or whoever he is. And it's more so on, okay, this is what I've been missing. This is what I need. This is what I'm supposed to have. But the man you with, he didn't have no intentions of being with you. See, it was a conversation that y'all didn't have. And that conversation, you said the word earlier, was about expectations and intentions. So it's like, now because you feel this way and this is what you want, and this isn't what he wants at the time. Now you done, like you said, it could either lead to fights, jail time, and like you leave a trail of broken people behind you.
Yeah. And I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about it. I'm like, man, I mean, because we're looking at it from the sex aspect, but I'm like, this is really bigger than sex. Yeah. I mean, this can happen even if you don't have sex in a relationship, this thing can still happen, because what you just said, if a woman, she was in a relationship and the past relationship, she wasn't getting what he's getting, maybe he's just a gentleman, it can send off the wrong signal. So I believe in situations like that. I mean, I think in relationships, I mean, and I'm just speaking from what I'm hearing, I'm just speaking to all the single people. It's like singles really need to have conversations, and really talk this thing out, and because it's so easy to assume. And I think one of the dangerous things of us as human beings, every last one of us, we all do it. You have the truth and you have the stories we tell ourselves. And if we don't get the truth, if somebody don't tell us the truth, we're going to create a story in ourselves. And the story we create in ourselves may be a love story. And somebody, whether it's the male or the female, because I've seen men been in the same situation where the woman, like, I'm not feeling you like that, we just friends. She allowed him to buy the baby diapers, and in his mind, he's thinking, I'm in the door, but then she's like, whoa, it's not like that, and now he's hurt. So I think on both ways, the conversation need to be had. And that's just something even for every single individual. It's like, man, you need to always communicate what you're feeling. I believe on the other end, sometimes the person that's feeling. Let me give you an example. If somebody said, you know what, we're gonna just be friends. If somebody feeling something other than friendship, I believe you need to verbalize that. You need to verbalize that. And here's the thing, most of the time the person is not going to verbalize it because they like, I don't want to stop what's happening, but you're creating danger to yourself. So that's just one of the things I want to, just from when I'm listening, just to really throw out even to my single brothers and sisters, to really communicate.
Wow. Yeah, I do have a piggyback question off that, because I've seen this happen. But do y'all feel that men and women, that they weaponize friendship, that they use the label of friendship, even though they're acting as it's a relationship, but they use friendship to give them the license to do whatever they want to do with however many people. And then if someone have that conversation and express that they want more, then they were like, oh, but we're friends. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I agree.
I was about to say, I definitely agree that people. And Cedric, when Cedric interjected, I know it happens to guys as well, but if I think that if you're presenting and we're having a conversation and we're communicating, and you say that you just want to be friends, and then I'm stating that I feel more, and the person's like, well, I just want to be friends, then I think that at some point the person is already feeling more. We may have to say, okay, wait a minute, I'm gonna have to pull back from this, because this is going to cause a danger to me, because I want more from this person than they're willing to offer at this moment.
Or I want more from the person that they're capable of giving. Yeah, I mean, it's like you can't. I mean, who go to the grocery store and get a pint of milk and expect a gallon to go into cups? We don't do that. It's like, but we do this in relationships. We have this expectation, false expectation. It's like, you know what? Because some people can't give you what they don't have.
Absolutely. And speaking to what Jamila said, if the person is purposely, maliciously doing it and they using it as a weapon to be able to do what they want to do with multiple people, I guess we have to kind of pay attention to their actions and what they are doing, and then we have to decide whoever it is. And that's a little
different. That's on the other end. I mean, because you got the players out there that say, man, you know what, this is what I'm about. This, I ain't trying to do this is what I'm doing. I'm playing the chess game, and I'm just trying to get what I need to get for that night or whatever. So I mean, you have two foes, but again, the male or the female that's single have to be very careful and have to be very intentional.
So what if it's not a chess game? You may find someone and you like them, and you all may become intimate, and it may go on for a while, but you don't want to be in a relationship, and they start catching feelings, and that's what they want. And so then in your mind, you have to make a conscious decision. am I going to keep dragging this on? Because the longer you take, the more those feelings go grow on their end. And if you don't cut it off, that's more of a hurt that it's going to be when you do cut it off. Or you could be like me in one of my last relationships and just go ahead with the flow, not wanting to hurt somebody, and be in a relationship and knowing that you're not all the way in the relationship. And that hurt them even more than it would if you would have just told them, I'm not ready.
Wow. And that's a different perspective, because what you're saying is like, I'm not intentionally doing something to hurt you. It's just over time, I realized being in a relationship with you is not what I want. But then you're saying to avoid hurting the person, you continue with the relationship, which ultimately cause more complications and more hurt anyway.
But then you could be a man that it happens over and over and over and over again. And so now you done been intimate with these women. You had that desire to be, how can I, for companionship? But that's really what it is. Because I'm going to tell you, I'm the type of person to where I'd rather have somebody to lay in the bed with, to hold and go to sleep comfortably at night. It's not just about sex, because sex has its moments, but like that companionship lasts. And so when you've done that, it's like, you don't want to give it up. But then it's like, well, I don't want to be in a relationship either. And so like like you said, we was talking about the flesh, denying the flesh. Well, you lose that battle because you gave in to the flesh. But because you lost that battle, you're not the one that's being hurt. You hurting this other person that's laying with you. Yeah. So it's a catch-22, but it's all about where's your heart. Because some men, like you said, they weaponize the friendship situation. Like, no, we just friends. Well, who is this calling you? Man, that don't matter. Me and you, we just friends, right? That's the card we trying to pull. Yeah. But nowadays, you got more women pulling the card than men.
Oh, wow.
I think, I mean, even going back to the original question, we say sex is complicated in relationships. I mean, again, talking about the whole thing, the flesh, the emotional aspect of it, but it's like, I believe, and I'm just saying that, I'm just speaking, this is out of wisdom in relationships. I mean, I believe every single have to come to a point. It's like putting a gun to your head and playing Russian roulette. And it's like every time you're single and you're just having sex, and this really makes sense to me. The Bible don't even deal with dating, it's just marriage, because dating is complicated. I mean, I'm listening to the conversation. I'm listening to it's a complicated thing because of society, because of television, because of, I mean, pornography is everywhere. You don't even have to look for pornography. It pops up on your cell phones and things like that. I mean, so all these things, it's almost in every movie. Every movie have some type of sex scene. So it's like, it's always there. So it's like you watching and you see it with your eyes. So now it's in you. Talk on the aspect of what should we start doing? Or what are some of the things we need to start working on to avoid this from happening over and over and over and over again? And people are dying and people are hurt and bleeding over and over and over again as a society.
Can I chime in real quick? Because I think we can say sex complicates things, but I think to the point that you're talking about too is the second thing, is that the lack of communication complicate things. And I think that's what I would go to, is that to keep this from happening over and over again, it's a consistent, constant communication. Because if you have feelings one day and they shift, communicate that. So I think but I think too, if you learn how to effectively communicate with someone, you can that's a skill set. You know how they have to say transferable things? You can transfer that into your marriage. So if you start practicing now on developing communication skills, because I think a lot of it goes back to what Sean said about there's expectations. And then when those expectations are not met, but how do you manage expectations? Communication.
How do you do that? Because it's like, I mean, even saying that, that's what I'm saying. It makes sense. It sounds good. But it's like the realness of it. If somebody already, it's like, okay, on Monday, okay, we're just friends. On Tuesday, somebody get feelings. You communicate and it still don't change how you feel. It already happened. The feelings already shift. So it's kind of, it's still that whole thing I'm saying, that Russian roulette, is that it's still a dangerous thing to me, because even if the feelings change, it still changed. And if you communicate the change, that individual can still say, hey, that's not what we signed up for. So it still don't change the fact, you know what I'm saying? So that's it. It's still it's still that danger. Go ahead, brother. I see you ready.
I remember when the girls used to do jump rope when they was little and they was waiting.
Oh, you got to time it. See?
We talk about how sex complicates things and how it begins to be complicated. Well, the complications come because it's not being used for what its purpose was.
Absolutely.
So if we go back to what sex was actually its purpose, it was to complete marriage.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And being done within the marriage is done right. Yeah. The reason why it's so complicated and it causes all these problems, and like you said, even if we go to AIDS and diseases and STDs and illegitimate children and all this stuff, is because it's not being done in the right context that it was created for.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if we go origin and the start, that's how we stop all this other stuff from happening, because it's a domino effect. Mm-hmm. And I say this, and I mean, I have sex and I'm not married. But at the end of the day, we all know what's right and what's wrong. We can't conform our way of thinking to the way that the world is, regardless of where we are at spiritually or what we practice or anything of that nature. Because at the end of the day, we have to operate in truth. Mm-hmm. And so when we think about sex, the reason why it's complicated because we ain't doing it right. I'm not talking about the form. I'm not talking about how we doing it or nothing like that. Yeah. I'm saying because we're doing it when we aren't supposed to.
Absolutely.
If you don't, Dr. Miles Monroe said something very powerful. He said, if you don't know the purpose of a thing, abuse is inevitable. And it goes back exactly to what you said. If you don't understand the original intent of what sex was created for, abuse, you can't avoid, abuse is going to happen. And right. I think that's what we're seeing.
How do we start using, because all the complications we talk about, I don't want to dismiss that or make it like it's nothing. Be right. Spiritual, about the situation. But the thing about it, like, it's in this situation, we realize, and we talked about it even from the beginning, first question, it's an issue. And even what you just said, it's an issue. It's an issue. Right. It's not according to the origin of what it was supposed to be used for. So it's like, what kind of steps can singles take to protect themselves and protect others?
Sometimes we look at somebody and their lust take over. Straight up, like, that's what I want. We can as individuals, we can take certain steps to like guard our heart, guard ourselves from going through that. But as a whole, I think it's going to continue to go on.
But I think you just said the most important thing is it starts with the individual to say you have to know, number one, who you are. Number two, what your boundaries are when you're in particular situations. Because if you wait until you're in that situation to decide, okay, is this going to be acceptable or not? Then it's like you're setting yourself up for failure. But if you can go in and know and say that sex is absolutely not on the table, and guess what? And can communicate that, then okay, then we can set a different path. And I think it goes back to the individual deciding for yourself. And for me, deciding before you start interacting with others.
Right.
And thinking about what Cedric is saying, because the whole idea is for us to have these type of conversations and be real, but then for everybody who hears it to walk away with some concrete information to say, hey, this is something that I can implement or something that I could do so that I don't keep repeating this cycle. Because I definitely believe, I'm a believer. I love God. I believe that God ordains and does everything for a purpose. Yeah. And I believe that God has all four of us here tonight having this conversation because somebody's going to see this video. They're going to hear this conversation and it's going to give them what they need to help them guard their heart, to not that you stop loving or stop or trying to grow or have relationships with people and find, obtain what God intends for us to have as a married couple or as people that desire that or whatever, but so that you won't experience the unnecessary complications of what we're talking about. And those things that continue to ring up again or timing, boundaries and limits, and decisions. Your decisions and your conversation is about your expectations and what you're willing to do. And then you have to, when all is said and done, like Jamila said, at some point as an individual, you have to make a decision to say, this is not working for me and I'm gonna have to let this go. Or this is going to further complicate what we once had. So we're going to have to do something different. Whatever it is, it's going to take those. I believe those are some practical things that would help someone. Timing. When you started talking about the jump rope, that's what was already in my head, timing. Because if you think about those kids double dutching, if you don't time it correctly, you're going to step on the rope. So the complication is going to come. You're going to get all tangled up. Exactly. You're going to get all tangled up and somebody could get hurt. So you have to time it just right to know when to jump in to keep moving. So that's the same thing we have to do with relationships. Timing is a big part. And for me, I think a lot of times if we really pay attention, sometimes we don't allow that timing. We meet somebody, oh, they look good to me. He look good to me. She looked good to me. He looked good to me. Oh, he sounds good. Oh, he said this. Oh, he said that. And immediately, boom, we all the way in like he husband material, she wifey material. And we all the way in, and we don't even know anything about this person. I don't even know if you have the same foundation that I have. I don't even know if you believe like I believe. I don't even know if you want to have kids like I want to have kids. We don't even, and a lot of times we jump forward and we get intimate with someone before we even had those discussions. And God forbid that you get intimate that time and now you got a kid. Now we got to have this discussion because we didn't. So I think a lot of it is timing, our boundaries and limits, and us discussing. Because when I say expectations and your intentions, you have to discuss that in order for somebody to know. Because I don't know what your expectations of me are if you never tell me. That's an invisible string attached to me that I don't know nothing about, because you expect me to be this person and I don't even know that. So those are the things that I take away, and I hope that someone would take away from everything we discussed, that timing, boundaries and limits, and discussion. You got to talk about it. Got to have communication.
If you're not making wise decisions, I mean, you can expect things to happen. You can expect car tires to get slashed. You can expect, I mean, I'm just being honest, you can expect
windows out your pain.
But you can expect these things,
right?
Because it leads to hurt.
That's true.
It leads to hurt. And it's like, I mean, we have to make wiser decisions as people in order to get to the point to say, you know what that takes too? It takes us not to be selfish, to put someone else's needs above our own.
Yeah.
And because when we really look at love, that's what love does. Love says, I'm going to consider you before me. But I think we have to stop being selfish and stop being about what I need in this moment and think about what someone else can need or benefit.
That's good.
Absolutely. So Fern, man, if somebody wants to connect with you and what you're doing, where should they go?
The best way to find me is going to be on Facebook, and that's just Fern Roberson III. You can find me on Facebook there. Also on Instagram, it's Fern the Third, with the third being spelled 3RD.
All right.
So we want to thank you for joining us today on TMC. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And we want to invite you to head on over to our leadership podcast, Lead to Greatness, where my husband is interviewing entrepreneurs and great leaders every week. And if you're listening on iTunes, rate the podcast and leave a review.
So we want to thank you for joining us today on TMC. Looking forward to hanging out with you again on next week as we continue to help you take your relationships
from surviving to thriving. Bye. See you next week.